Hello, I'm Iris. Today I'm talking about a lot of things, honestly, but specifically the rise of Shein as fast fashion 2.0, how it was able to gain such a hold on social media platforms, as well as social pressures when it comes to being fashionable relating to trend cycles. But first, let's take a moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video. This video is sponsored by Wondershare Filmora. So one thing that I think is really important is accessibility to creativity and making things like YouTube videos. And that is where Wondershare Filmora comes in. It's an easy to use video editing program that is more affordable than other comprehensive editing softwares. And when I tell you it's actually fire, I mean it. Like when I opened the program as someone who has been using a professional software for years, I was genuinely extremely impressed. Wondershare Filmora also offers an extensive collection of video elements, transitions, and filters to help you explore your creativity. And it has a huge collection of actually good music built into the program. They recently added some new features like the AI portrait, which highlights the subject by erasing the background without the need for a green screen. Another new thing in version 10.4 are AR stickers, which automatically detect the human face and follow you as you move. It's extremely beginner friendly, and you can get it at $51.99 a year or the perpetual plan for just under $80. They're also offering a back to school campaign right now, so students can get up to 30% off their license. If you'd like to check out Wondershare Filmora, please do. I'll have a link in the description. Maybe this is your sign to finally start a YouTube channel. Thank you again, Wondershare Filmora, for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back into my big long rant. So we're going to start out this video by defining what a trend cycle is. This article from Polished Pearls, which is a fashion blog, claims that there are 5 stages to a fashion cycle: the introduction, the rise, the peak, the decline, and outdated. Essentially from the beginning of a design existing to its popularization, and then finally the death of the trend and obsolescence. What's really interesting is that this article talks about the introduction of design in a way that I think is no longer true. This article assumes that a specific designer is sort of at the forefront of a trend existing, but I think that it's increasingly true that young people, young girls especially, play a large and influential role in the development of new trends, especially on platforms like TikTok. So yes, a designer made the clothing, but it's not popular because it was a specific designer. It's popular because a bunch of TikTokers thought it was cool. In this way, fashion has shifted, and who gets a say in what's going to be a trend has shifted. Because theoretically, you could post a picture of your outfit on Pinterest or any other online platform, and anyone could see it. Whereas for a long time, the only exposure that people had to new design trends was through magazines or movies or television or advertisements. Publishers had much more control in making or breaking trends, but now a lot of that power has shifted into the hands of teenage girls and other young people, of course, but specifically teenage girls. I think teenage girls have such power when it comes to trends, when it comes to what music is popular. Like, think about how Olivia Rodrigo managed to gain such a hold on the music charts. Like, who was listening to her? Huh? Who was it? You know the answer. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the 20-year trend cycle, which is the idea that these trends that have gone through their entire cycle of introduction to obsolescence come back every 20 years. But I have my own theory about the 20-year trend cycle, which is that when we're kids, we see what's trending and our jelly brains absorb that. But we can't really participate in the trends because as children, we don't have any buying power when it comes to fashion. But when we grow up, we have purchasing power that we didn't have when we were kids, and we're able to fulfill childhood fantasies. These are deep wants that fuel the revision of trends from our childhoods. I think that there's also a sense of escapism when it comes to repeating trends that we haven't lived through, like, 80s, 90s, 70s trends among young people, because it's the time before phones. Everything was simpler then, and I think a lot of people romanticize that. So as many ways in which you can exist in that older world, a lot of people try to, and one of the big ways is through fashion. Now, many people believe that fashion trends are going through this cycle of introduction to outdated faster than ever before, especially because websites like Romwe and Shein and Zaful are able to produce new designs incredibly quickly. Like in as little as 3 days, they can go from having a design to having it in production and on the website. Furthermore, these specific retailers operate solely online without the need for a retail space and are able to take the risks of producing new designs more easily easily than traditional retailers. So how are they able to do this? Essentially, these online retailers can buy batches of clothing in as little as 100 units and test how those do on the website before committing to going into full production. This essentially gives these brands an incentive to continually test out new designs and allows them to do so at a much lower risk than would be true for brick and mortar stores, who generally have to buy larger batches from the start to be able to test in multiple stores. Not to mention, it takes longer to really see the results of those batches in traditional stores. This gives stores like Shein an incredible advantage over stores like Zara and Forever 21, which are also fast fashion but operate in traditional retail space. Some consider Shein to be a fast fashion 2.0 because everything about how it operates is more efficient and faster. It catches the trends right away. And I also want to put in a little note about fast fashion brands in general before we move on, and that is that a lot of them thrive off of stolen designs, which I'm not going to talk about further in this video because I don't want to do that. But I'll leave a link in the description to a video that does talk about it. Now that we have a bit of a background on Shein and stores like it, I'm saying Shein in this video, but honestly a lot of this applies to all of these fast fashion 2.0 brands. But let's talk about how these companies' ad campaign styles utilize influencers. It's a semi-recent development in history that children want to be YouTubers or even now TikTokers when they grow up, because those jobs didn't exist before. But a lot of people want to have that job. I want to have that job. I'm trying really hard. Please subscribe. Because of this, utilizing influencers for these ad campaigns is an incredibly smart marketing move for these companies. Influencers have that name for the fact that they influence their audiences and in turn, online culture. Of course, trends and culture are collectivized, but online stars can have a big say in what becomes popular. If you clicked on this video, you're probably familiar with the $500 or $1,000 or even $2,000 Shein hauls that have a grip on TikTok and YouTube. There's a lot of criticism for people who do these hauls now because there's the idea that if you have that much money to spend, you can afford to shop not fast fashion, and therefore you shouldn't buy from these brands. I generally support that sentiment. However, I do want to say that the folks who started doing these hauls probably didn't actually have to buy the clothing. It was very likely sent to them in exchange for making a video. This type of advertising through influencers, and especially growing still small influencers, is one of the ways that Shein and other fast fashion companies have managed to plant roots across the internet. I myself got an email from Zaful 2 times now, but the first time they were offering me $500 worth of clothing in exchange for doing a video for them. A younger me might have taken that deal. And certainly I wouldn't question it if someone who wasn't yet earning off of a platform decided to take that deal, specifically if they don't make money like that. And another thing is that these companies target, young people because we are so involved in online culture. But young people have a little less critical thought skills because our brains are still developing. And the reality is that a lot of teens are going to be really excited by the prospect of working with one of these brands. But the moral implications of essentially advertising for a fast fashion company aren't even going to come. You're going to be blinded by your want for the trendy clothing, and for representing a big brand, that's going to feel like a huge deal. It's going to feel like an honor even. It's exciting to get a brand deal. But because of this, I would argue that a lot of companies, not just fast fashion ones, really take advantage of small creators because they are more likely to do work without pay. But that's kind of an entirely different video on the inner workings of brand deals and the pressure to remain advertiser friendly. I'm going to put a side note in here for any small creators who might be watching. I think it is fine to do videos in exchange for goods if you feel like it's worth it to you. But I do want you to know that if a brand has specific requirements about what you should be saying about their brand, you should be paid for that. So what does this have to do with anything? Why does it matter that all these small creators are doing these exchange type brand deals? Basically, our representation of normal consumer behavior has become skewed. People who don't even have that many followers and therefore are naturally more relatable to a viewer are often chosen for these hauls because they will work for free. They don't spend $500 on clothing and they don't spend $1,000 on clothing. But suddenly this appears to be normal consumer behavior and behavior that is okay to replicate because so many people are doing these online hauls. But that phenomenon of buying that much clothing at once is called overconsumption. This type of shopping habit is probably more obvious to lower income viewers as ridiculous. You're not going to spend half your rent on clothing, so obviously these hauls aren't a representation of normal consumer behavior. But a lot of the consumer base of Shein is middle class or upper middle class people who would more readily be able to participate in that overconsumptionist trend of behavior. And so there's a new normal among people who can afford it, and that new normal is overconsumption. I think it's also really important to talk about the popularity of these haul videos because not everyone is sponsored. But these videos are so popular with viewers that people who are not sponsored by these brands might be even more likely to spend this much money at once for the purpose of doing a haul video with a clickable title that will get a lot of views. It is an investment. So with much of advertising being done on social media, through sponsorships and targeted ads, and with the nature of these stores being online, people are able to see an item and immediately go and buy it. And if you get repeated exposure to a product, in my experience, I'm sure there are scientific studies on this, but in my experience, if I get repeated exposure to a product, even if I kind of don't like it at first, suddenly I'm more and more likely to click on that advertisement. Things start to look a lot more attractive when I see them again and again. And online shopping is more popular than ever, partially because of COVID and the inability to safely go into retail spaces for an entire year. Even now, it's not safe. Vaccinated people can get COVID. Please still get your vaccine if you haven't already. But online shopping is also popular because of the convenience of it and the fact that people are often able to find things at a much more affordable price online than in retail stores and can find more specific items. And living is so expensive already that why would you want to spend more for a less convenient shopping experience? Not to mention the two-factor gratification that comes with online shopping. There's of course the gratification of finding exactly what you want and placing your order, and then there's the delayed gratification that comes with waiting for your package to arrive and it arriving. And so because of this online environment and because online shopping is so popular now, participating in trends has never been easier. It is more affordable and accessible than ever, and the cost of it is one that you don't see. Like environmental damage, thinking about how these items are produced and the environmental costs of shipping, as well as costs like the exploitation of labor and poor working environments. But even with these unseen costs, companies like Shein have such a grip on consumers that they're not going away anytime soon. The question is, will people get tired of quickening trend cycles? Like, are we really gonna buy a new wardrobe every season? Like, that's kind of exhausting and also expensive. And will overconsumption be replaced? We've seen people now doing thrift hauls instead of buying clothing new, but there's still a trend of overconsumption when it comes to these videos. You could have gone in and picked out one or two things that you really loved, but instead you went in and picked out 15 things because it was affordable, and because you kind of like the item, and because it was on trend. And to be fair, you wouldn't have a haul video without those 15 items. I personally find that I have less appreciation for the clothing that I do buy when I buy a lot of it at once, because it kind of devalues the amount of joy that I have for each individual piece. I'm like spread thin in my appreciation. So how does all of this relate to social pressures when it comes to fashion? Well, the answer to this is like, do we need to be trendy? Can we be fashionable without being trendy? But I'm gonna do my whole little talk thing. I'm gonna remove us from the online world. Thank God, we're done. Actually, we're not. We're going to come back, but I'm going to remove us for a second. And I'm going to talk about my own personal experience with the pressure to be fashionable. As many of you know, I make androgynous fashion videos. Yes, that's online. We're pretending this is just me. Nope, nobody watches those videos. No, why would you do that? So I make those videos, but I didn't really find my own personal style when it comes to clothing until I got to college, for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons was that I ultimately felt uncomfortable in trendy clothing because they weren't me. I'm non-binary, and so it kind of felt like I was dressing up to be a cis woman every day. So I didn't love what I wore, even if it was really trendy and if I should have liked it. Even the clothing that I saw in hauls and was like, I want to buy it. If I went out and bought it, I would feel awful in it. And that's on not being cisgender. Another reason is that I had very little exposure to lots of different fashion examples from people I knew. I went to a very small high school on a very small island with a very small town, so there weren't a lot of diverse styles and not many styles for me to pick and choose from. But when I got to college, I discovered the art students here at my college, and they really pick a fit every day. And I suddenly kind of felt all this pressure to fit in with them, but also I was like so inspired by this type of fashion that I didn't mind adopting it into my own style, and I really fell into dressing like that, and I completely dress like that now. And of course I honor how I feel in my clothing, but it definitely felt like I was taking representations of clothing from different genders, and I just felt more at home in my clothing, even though I was kind of adopting a style I was seeing on other people. And after 3 years of incorporating these styles that I found out about on my little college campus, I visited New York, and I discovered that it was just New York fashion. I literally looked around and I felt like I was at college. I was like, that's a student, that's a student. And it's just completely the same. It's not really a unique style. It's just like New York fashion. And then suddenly there was so much more pressure to fit into this greater fashion movement, especially when I was in the city. I was like, I need to be looking my best every moment, every day. Don't catch me without all my rings on. You know what I mean? Rings on all the time. I'm not wearing my rings right now. It's clear we're at home. Yeah, this is a private space. This is very private between us. It's a private space. But I always want people to look at me and think, that's a cool outfit. And the pressure that comes from that is kind of unbearable, because getting dressed is something that you do every single day. So of course I care about how I'm perceived by others. Of course I want to look cool in other people's eyes, and I want to feel cool. That's kind of like what ultimately matters. I was suddenly like, I was worried about my outfits. I shouldn't be worried about my outfits, especially if they're outfits I like and I wear a lot. Now, take that feeling and amplify it. We are not just in New York anymore. We are part of a global web of communication. And we want to be popular, and we want to be trendy and fashionable and taken seriously by our peers. It's about social capital, and it is often about the emulation of wealth. Emulating wealth is about how you dress and what you show online. And spending $500 on clothing at once is wealthy person behavior. Whether or not you're sponsored, that's what you're presenting to the world. Low-key, like 2 tangents in there, because I did want to talk about the emulation of wealth, but it didn't connect very well, and I'm now realizing it, but it's too late because I wrote the script. Take what you're given, please. Thank you. So here's what I want you to take away from this video. Be conscious about your buying choices, but don't throw low-income people under the bus for buying from fast fashion brands. Try not to overconsume, appreciate your clothing, and wear what you want as a celebration of yourself. My name is Olympia. This was my video on trend cycles and a bunch of other shit. And if you did enjoy it, please do like and subscribe. And also don't forget to check out Wondershare Filmora with the link in my description. Okay, it is time for me to go. But I love you, and I will see you in the next one.